Hello and good morning, everybody. Welcome to our first webinar for the year, and this is our opening salvo for 2020. Before we start with the session, I'd like to remind all those who are present that during the webinar, you may ask your questions by raising your virtual hand, which is found here at this portion. And you may also type in your questions in the chat area, which is found here in the pink arrow. Also, as a reminder, please be respectful when you type your messages for the speaker or other participants in the Collaborate session. All right. So for today, we're very lucky to have our resource speaker. He is a medical doctor and an infectious disease expert from the Research Institute for Tropical Medicine. He is a member of the research group on AIDS at RITM, and he has published a number of papers about HIV. Currently, he is affiliated with several hospitals in the South, in particular in Laguna and Batangas. Students, MCL faculty members and staff, guests, let's all welcome Dr. Mark Kristoffer U, Pasayan.
So before we go and discuss NCOV, let me just give you a background on what an emerging or a re-emerging infectious disease is. So by definition, a newly emerging infectious disease is a disease that have been discovered in the human host for the very first time. And NCOV, the 2019 NCOV, is one good example of a newly emerging infectious disease. While a re-emerging infectious disease is an infectious disease that reappear, usually in more pathogenic form and in rapidly increasing or new geographic locations for apparent control or eradication. Example, well, locally, a re-emerging infectious disease that we have in the Philippines right now is polio. That's one. In other countries, it would be Ebola, and in 2016, 2017, it would be the Zika virus disease. So why are we in big trouble when it comes to emerging infectious disease? Because we are actually in the hotspot region for EIDs, for both zoonotic infections and vector-borne diseases, as well as drug-resistant infectious diseases. So the Southeast Asian region, including South Asia and China, belong to that hotspot, and we usually see a lot of new infectious diseases coming from this region. Why? Probably because of population density, because of global travel, because of socioeconomic and environmental, as well as ecological factors. And this provides the basis for identifying the regions where new EIDs are most likely to originate. About EID, we ask how come an infectious disease from an animal can traverse species barrier and infect humans. That's because, you know, it's an interplay of a lot of factors, ecological factors, human factors, as well as the microbiologic factors. And most of the infectious diseases, for example, like a particular virus, would have its natural host, and the natural host would be asymptomatic to any infectious diseases. And there will be a transmission host that will be the conduit or of the spillover from the natural host to the spillover hosts, which are the humans. So for classic example, let's go to MERS and the SARS. The natural host of SARS would be your bats, and the transition host would be camel for the MERS and the civet cats for the SARS. And eventually the terminal host would be humans. Okay, so emerging infectious diseases, it's nothing new. It's not new in the Philippines. We have had several in the country since we were young, or some of you might not be born yet. And we have reported a lot since, let's say, 1996, in the past 25 years. In 2003, for example, that's a time SARS-CoV was reported, and we had cases also in the Philippines. And MERS-CoV was reported in 2015. I think we had 4 cases reported in the Philippines, and the most recently reported cases of 2019 and CoV. Last year, we had an outbreak of measles and dengue. Okay, which now leads me to the core of my discussion, which is the 2019 nCoV acute respiratory disease. So what is the coronavirus, the 2019 coronavirus? This is the 3D representation of the new virus. So it has a core genetic material, which is RNA, and it's the biggest RNA virus that has been discovered. And the genetic material is enveloped, surrounded by an envelope. And along the envelope are the spike glycoprotein, which are instrumental in its ability to infect or to attach to human cells and thereby causing infection. Now, why is it called a coronavirus? Because the spikes resemble a crown, and the Latin word for crown is corona. So that's why it's called a coronavirus. Okay, and this is just a illustrative representation of how the virus infects the human. So it can actually attach to the human cell because the human cell has receptors where those spikes can attach to. And the human cell can now, or the virus can now infect the humans because of endocytosis or by fusion. And since it's an RNA virus, its genetic material can easily be transcribed to produce several copies of the genetic material and as well as proteins. And once the genetic materials and proteins are available, it will now be absorbed by your endoplasmic reticulum, where the new virions will be produced. And once the new virion progenies are produced, it will now be released out from the cell by exocytosis, and that's how it infects human cells, and several copies are produced.
So,
Okay,
quick question, Doc.
yeah, yep.
Right. Is this why it takes 14 days for somebody who might have been infected to display symptoms? Is it really because of, the length of time it takes for human cells to get to engulf the virus and then eventually proliferate?
Yes, the incubation period for nCoV ranges from 1 to 14 days, on the average 10 days. So someone could have symptoms even as early as 1 day from infection. Some it would take 14 days because aside from this mechanism of invading human cells, the immune system of humans also play a role. So if your immune system is quite robust and you are protected by the virus, it will take more time for the virus to infect you compared to a person whose immune cells or immune system is very weak or low.
Okay.
Okay, so the next slide tells you the different coronaviruses. So the nCoV is a coronavirus that is not, I mean, human infection of coronavirus is nothing new. It's not new. We have been probably infected with coronaviruses before because there are 4 human coronaviruses that have been identified so far. And these 4 can usually cause your common colds, your usual sipon and ubo. And these are mild symptoms, and you'll recover from it even without any medicine. But there are the 3 emerging human coronaviruses, and SARS, the one that was discovered in Guangdong, China in 2002, which caused also a pandemic outbreak during that time is one good example. And the more recent one is the MERS-CoV, which was detected in Saudi Arabia in 2012, which was also reported in the Philippines. And the recently discovered one, the novel coronavirus. It's called novel because it's the first time that it is discovered in humans. That's why the term novel or novel. So let me just go now to the current outbreak. So this is the picture of Dr. Li Wenliang. He's the doctor who died just recently because of the 2019 nCoV. And he is actually the whistleblower. He is the first doctor who told everyone on social media. He messaged 150 medical students about the situation in Wuhan in December. So he messaged them 7 cases of SARS like have been confirmed in the South China fruit and seafood market, and they were isolated in the emergency department for a hospital. And he was told actually by the Chinese police to take down this message because it's causing a lot of panic. But and coming days, the outbreak happened, and the rest is history. And this is Wuhan. This is the Huanan seafood market in Hubei province in China, in South China, which is the origin of the outbreak. Because during around late December, after Christmas, there were cases of pneumonia being reported in Wuhan. And reviewing the history of these cases of pneumonia point to a commonality among those infected with the viral infection, and that's exposure to this Huanan seafood market. And that's why they closed it down in January 1, when on December 31, this one, they reported cluster of pneumonia cases in the city. And they closed the market in January 1. And on January 7, the causative agent of the pneumonia infecting all these people were known, and that's a novel coronavirus. On January 11, the first fatal case report was reported in China. On January 12, they now found out the genome of the 2019 nCoV. Why is this important? Because you need the genome to prepare the primer to determine or to be used for the test kits that will be used for the diagnosis of this infection. So this is very important. On January 13, the first confirmed case outside China was reported, and this was in Thailand. Then 16, Japan reported its first case, and then on January 19, South Korea reported its first case. So in a span of 3 weeks, it has crossed already geographic borders. On January 21, the first confirmed case in the US was reported. I think this was in Chicago, Illinois. And the first PUI was reported in Cebu. So a person is under investigation is someone who develops the disease, who develops symptoms, meaning fever or cough and colds, and has a history of travel to China. And this is the pediatric case in Cebu that was reported as a PUI. On January 23, there's a rapid rise of cases, which WHO acknowledges, and there's a reported case of human-to-human transmission. Why is human-to-human transmission considered in this case? Because there are now cases of the infection with no epidemiologic link or no history of travel to Wuhan. So meaning they got this from someone who has been to Wuhan, but they got it locally. So that was reported in 23. And in January 24, the result came out. The one that the kid in Cebu is actually negative to the novel coronavirus. On January 24, there's a confirmed case in Vietnam of a human-to-human transmission. January 29, that's the time that the test was made available in the Philippines. And on January 30, the next day, the first confirmed case in the Philippines was reported. This is a 38-year-old female that was admitted and managed in San Lazaro Hospital. And during that time, the WHO also declared the 2019 nCoV as a public health emergency of international concern. So that's a PHEIC. And we usually call it as a fake disease because no, PHEIC is read as fake. And WHO announces a public health emergency of international concern if infectious disease is already crossing geographic and all countries of the WHO need to step up their surveillance, their border control, and the management and diagnostics of this disease. And on February 2, our second confirmed case in the Philippines was reported. Unfortunately, the patient died. This is a 40-year-old male companion of the first case. And on February 5, third confirmed case, the 60-plus-year-old traveled to was the third confirmed case in the Philippines. As of today, I can safely state that there is no new confirmed case reported by the Department of Health, although there are a lot of persons under investigation, and we do not have any local transmission yet. Most of the confirmed cases are travelers from China. Okay. I saw one question: are the symptoms simultaneously manifest? I'll go back to that question, Matthew, when I discuss the clinical manifestation. So these are the countries as February 8, 2020, reporting confirmed cases of 2019 nCoV. So this is Feb 8. Globally, there are 35,000 cases, and China reports a big chunk of those cases. And that's February 8, but this is February 10. As you can see, there are now 40,000 confirmed cases, with 6,000 cases being in critical state. And there have been 910 deaths, and one is a death outside China, which is in the Philippines. So the Philippines actually is the first country in the whole world that reported the first mortality outside China, and that is including Hong Kong. Hong Kong reported its first case later. I think 2 to 3 days after the Philippines. So the case fatality rate is 2.2, which means 2 to 3 out of 10 people with the nCoV will die, and most of the deaths are seen among those with other illnesses like hypertension, diabetes, and cardiovascular diseases. And so far, 28 countries have been affected by this outbreak. What does the test kit for RITM contain? It contains the primer. There are PCR, or there are PCR made available by different institutions. However, the primer came from Japan, and this is the one that was developed and distributed by the WHO. Okay, so this is the situation in Wuhan. This is just pictures I got from Twitter. So these are the healthcare workers, and this is what they usually wear. This is actually the same thing that we wear in RITM when we see confirmed cases of coronavirus. So it involves covering your whole body, including your eyes, your mouth, your nose, and you're wearing gloves and boots, because not because we're afraid to get infected or not because this is highly infectious, but because this is something new. So we really don't know yet how fast and how aggressive the virus can be. So it's best to wear this protective, personal protective equipment. Okay, so this is our local data. This is reported 2 days ago, February 9. So far, we have had 284 persons under investigation and 3 confirmed cases, 2 NCR and 1 in Bohol. The one in Bohol actually left already when the test came in, and she's already asymptomatic and has recovered yet, and has recovered already. And so the extent of this outbreak goes as far as the north in the Cordillera Autonomous Region and down south, Soxargen. But most of the cases are seen in the National Capital Region. And out of these 3 cases, of course, like what I said, we had 1 case of mortality. Okay, so like what I said a while ago, there are 3 emerging coronaviruses: the 2003 SARS-CoV, the 2012 MERS-CoV, and the 2019 nCoV. Let's compare one from the other. So SARS, a confirmed case of 8,000 compared to 37,000 that we have now, 40,000 that we have now. There are less cases of MERS-CoV reported than the SARS and the 2019 nCoV. And we almost have the same number of countries affected so far. We don't know if this will go higher in the next coming days and weeks. But look at the case fatality rate. More deaths are seen in MERS-CoV, less in SARS, and even lesser in the 2019 nCoV. So what does this infograph tell us? Well, it tells us that 2019 nCoV is more infectious. It spread even more. It can spread to larger population and faster than SARS and MERS. However, even though it can spread faster, it causes death less than your SARS and MERS-CoV. So it's less deadly, but it's more infectious. I have a question here. With all the medical gear doctors are wearing combating nCoV, does this imply wearing masks won't be a guarantee? Well, we are using this gear because this is a new virus, and this is a new infectious disease. And if you are a doctor, a nurse, a healthcare worker taking care of this infection, necessary precaution must be in place. However, the use of your mask is actually recommended only for those who are taking care of the sick and for those who are sick, for those with symptoms. If you do not have symptoms, you do not have any other medical problem, it's not advisable to wear masks, or it's not recommended to wear masks. And that's a WHO and a DOH recommendation. Is it airborne? There are now reports that telling us that it's airborne, but some experts are contesting that claim. So right now it's contact, meaning you can get it from surfaces, you can get it from handshakes, you can get it from kissing the cheek, or droplet, meaning you can get this from coughing, from sneezing, from respiratory secretions. SARS and MERS are droplet. So you get them from respiratory secretions from animals, like from camels, and from human-to-human transmission coming from your respiratory secretions. Okay, so what are the symptoms of the 2019 NCOV. This is from the latest study published just a couple of days ago. And this is the study that reported the most number of cases, 138 cases were included in the study. And they found out that most of the cases, or nearly half of the cases, would have underlying medical conditions. And the most common would be your hypertension. Next would be cardiovascular diseases like your heart attack or congestive heart failure. And some are diabetics. But the most common symptoms, 99% of these cases would present with fever. Some would have would complain of fatigue, dry cough. More than half would say they have dry cough, and then would be your anorexia or loss of appetite, myalgia or muscle pain, and dyspnea or difficulty of breathing. So, are you at risk of getting NCOV? Well, if you are in an area where there's a community outbreak, like China, and what's going on with other countries like Japan, Korea, and Singapore, you are at risk of getting this infection if you are an elderly. If you are aged more than 50 years of age with underlying diseases like diabetes, Parkinson's, or cardiovascular diseases. This is based on the latest data. Or, like what I said, you are living in China or around that area where there is a sustained community outbreak. And if you are taking care of someone who has the disease, and that's your risk factor for getting the infection as well. How is it transmitted? Well, reports have verified that human-to-human transmission occurs. Oh, sorry, animal-to-human transmission occurs because this happened. This outbreak started when all these people having pneumonia got exposed to the fresh animals and fresh produce in that Huahan seafood market. And there's also reports of human-to-human transmission. Some people got infected and they don't have any exposure to any animals where this virus came from. And of course, nosocomial transmission that has been reported as well. That's why even doctors in Wuhan are getting sick, even dying because they got infected with nCoV. In what way diabetic people can get nCoV? Is it in relation to their immune system? Yes, because diabetics would have a poor immune response to an infection. That's why not even to nCoV, but we see diabetics having poor control of infection, especially, for example, if they get a diabetic foot infection, if they have a non-healing wound, they have poor response because the immune system is low. And that's one common thing among diabetics. Okay, so here, there's this question, because in the previous slide, transmission of nCoV will also involve animal to human. Now, how come this virus that is first discovered among humans were thought to have originated from bats? Because this is the study, a phylogenetic analysis of the 2019 nCoV and how is it related to other existing coronaviruses in animals. And they found out that the 2019 nCoV, they studied, I think, 11 isolates, and they have the same phylogenetic makeup. And the phylogenetic makeup of this coronaviruses are 88% identical with a naturally occurring coronaviruses in bats. So they say that yes, bats could have been the source or could have been the natural host of the nCoV. And comparing the 2019 nCoV with the SARS-CoV, which also originated in China, it has a 79% identity. And the one that originated from the Middle East, the MERS-CoV, it is 50% identical with the 2019 nCoV of Wuhan. So this just shows that no, all coronaviruses are genetically linked with each other. It's just how close the genetic makeup of one coronavirus to another that will tell us where this virus actually came from. But then the question is, the bats are the natural host. And like what I said kanina, if there's a natural host, there should be a transmission host. There's an animal that acted as the link between the bats and the animals. Now, what if there are bats? How can we say that there is an intermediate host when um, phylogenetic makeup already told us that it actually originated from bats? Because there is no contact among cases in Wuhan. There's no contact with bats because during that time in December, the outbreak happened during the time when most bat species in Wuhan are hibernating, meaning there are no bats in that seafood market. So we cannot say that it's the intermediate host uh, would be the bats because there's no exposure to these animals. Also, there are bats sold or found at the Wuhan seafood market, whereas various non-aquatic animals were available for purchase. So if you saw some viral photos of bats being eaten or being served in a soup, the WHO has already told us that it's a fake photo and it did not come from that region. Also, another evidence is that the sequence identity between the 2019 nCoV and those close relatives coronaviruses from bats was less than 90%, meaning there's still that link which has a more than 90% identity. There is that animal that contains the coronavirus that is more than 90% identical with the human coronavirus. And in both SARS-CoV and MERS-CoV, acted as the natural reservoir, with another animal acting as an intermediate host with humans as terminal hosts. So that Wuhan seafood market, they sold live animals from fish to snakes to whatever. So any of those animals could have been the transmission host of the 2019 nCoV. So there is another animal that is acting as an intermediate host, and it is still unknown. So how do we treat and how do we prevent the 2019 nCoV infection? Well, symptomatic treatment is the way to manage this infection. Symptomatic meaning if you have fever, you give medicine for the fever. If you have difficulty of breathing, if you have cough, you give medicines for the symptoms. The civet cats is the transmission host of the SARS, but it's very difficult to say that it's the civet cats because in the phylogenetic analysis, they found out that it's way beyond the possibility that it is related to the SARS and to the bat that is the source of the civet cat. So there is the link between these two, and we don't know what animal that is. Maybe dogs, maybe cats. Who knows? Who knows what's available in the Wuhan market for sale? So the virus has no specific drug of choice yet. So if you see some reports online that this drug is effective and this drug is effective, this herbal medicine is effective, no, those are false claims. Before we can say that this drug is effective against any infection, several clinical trials must be done first before it is licensed, licensed as a drug. No, coconut oil or any herbal medicine is not a drug or any not an effective treatment against nCoV. Whoever says that coconut oil may also be using tawa-tawa against dengue. Currently, there are no antivirals that have effective treatment for the coronavirus. So how do we prevent the coronavirus infection? This is the infographic coming from the WHO, but definitely washing hands regularly. Avoid if you are, if you love shaking hands with people, make sure that their hands are clean, and then make sure that you also clean your hands after. I was actually in a meeting yesterday, and I was so surprised that every time that people would shake hands, they will bring out their alcohol hand rubs and then just do alcohol hand hygiene every after shaking hands. And then cover your mouth and nose. That's cough etiquette with medical mask, tissue, or sleeve or flex elbow when coughing or sneezing. Avoid unprotected close contact with anyone developing cold or flu-like symptoms, and seek medical care if you have fever, cough, and difficulty breathing. Um, if one joke nga kanina was, if you are in an elevator, mas nakakahiya na ngayon ang umubo kaysa sa magpass. Anyway, so when visiting live markets, avoid direct, unprotected contacts with live animals and surfaces with animals. And then cook your food, especially thoroughly. Like what I said, we don't know yet the transmission host of this virus, so it may be in fresh produce, and making sure that you have clean and safe produce and adequately cooked transmission of your nCoV. Yeah, if you want to be alone, just cough and everyone will go away. Okay, so there's this question. It's contact. How can nCoV be transmitted just by touching a doorknob or touching a surface or touching the buttons on an escalator? Because there's this study that was published 2006. So way before this nCoV came out, but this came out after SARS, and it shows the persistence of viruses on dry inanimate subjects or surfaces. Sorry. So all coronaviruses can actually last for 3 hours on surfaces and can still infect the susceptible humans or hosts even after 3 hours. Cytomegalovirus, also a common virus, can last for 8 hours. This is the most common virus causing respiratory tract infection and pneumonia, and it can actually last for 2 to 7 days. So even surfaces can be your conduit for viral transmission. So it's not enough that we do hand hygiene. We need to also clean our surfaces or our work area or our surroundings to make sure that these viruses will not proliferate. And this has been validated by this journal or this article that needs to be published pa. And this article reported that human coronavirus can infect infectious or on inanimate surfaces for up to 9 days. And surface disinfection, your regular Clorox, sodium hypochlorite, or your ethanol is enough to significantly reduce coronavirus infectivity on surfaces within 1 minute exposure. And they expect that this is similar in effect against your 2019 nCoV. There have been reports from Australia that it's airborne, but still experts are saying that droplet remains the main reason for transmission. It can be airborne if the patient is intubated or hooked to a mechanical ventilator, because if a patient is hooked to a mechanical ventilator, it can release some aerosols which can be airborne. Hence, it can be transmitted actually via airborne if the there are aerosols producing procedures being done with the patient, such as intubation or when you put a tube inside the mouth or during nebulization. So the airborne risk actually is in the healthcare setting, not in the community setting. We don't see patients being intubated in the mall, right? Okay, so what is the government doing? Well, you've seen reports, you've seen updates, and believe me, the Department of Health is on top of everything. It's just that maybe there's that fear that whatever's happening in other countries will happen to us. But remember, the three cases that we have had so far are imported ones. These are tourists coming to the country. But we don't have any sustained community outbreaks yet, as what is happening in Thailand, Singapore, and in Japan. Um, was the travel restriction a little bit too late? No, because the travel restriction actually happened when the WHO recommended that travel restrictions should be in place. It was not in place during the first 2 weeks of January, and we don't know how far or how extensive this is going to be. So, but what we are doing now is to screen everyone who's coming in to the country, to screen everyone whether they have symptoms or not, and if they have symptoms, they need to be investigated and monitored for the next 2 days, 2 weeks. So this is the Department of Health, and this is the algorithm that we're following. You are considered a person under investigation if you have any of the symptoms of cough and or fever, and you have a history of travel to China, including Taiwan, Hong, and Macau. So that's mainland China plus the two special administrative regions of Hong Kong and Macau, and the other country of China, which is Taiwan. And you are a person under monitoring or for monitoring if you do not have symptoms, but you had history of travel to China and or Taiwan. So, for example, you've been to Taiwan today, you arrive from Taiwan today, you have no symptoms, it is advised that you do self-quarantine for the next 2 weeks. If you develop any symptoms of fever or cough or colds, it's best to see or to go to the nearest hospital for screening and quarantine. So my last few slides is that, what we're seeing now is just the tip of the iceberg. But remember that the 2019 nCoV is just what we have right now, what we are seeing right now, what's being reported right now. But there are other emerging infectious diseases that is lurking behind our back, waiting to explode. And this is also posing a lot of threat to public health. And we don't know what's going to happen in the next coming days and years. So my last words for this talk is that in recent years, we have seen the emergence and re-emergence of many infectious diseases. Outbreaks highlight our shortcomings in understanding the complexities of infectious diseases, and the reasons for the emergence of these infectious diseases are complex and multiple. And clearly, human activities are a key factor for driving disease emergence, and current knowledge of the various emerging viruses is needed. And it could be said that the current global situation favors disease emergence, and we may be faced with more outbreaks or pandemics of infectious diseases in the future. Again, good morning and thank you for your attention.